Hi, everybody. In tonight's class, we're going to talk about genre study. And what I'm going to do is first give an overview of what genre study is in this particular presentation. And then in subsequent presentations, you're actually going to walk through different genre studies. In our semester, we're going to really delve into narrative, persuasive, and informational. But please know that there are all sorts of other genres on top of that. Those are just the three right now that are being privileged by Common Core, but those shouldn't be the only three that you teach within your classroom. Before we really start though, I would like for you just to pause the video and take 10 minutes and write into the day. So go ahead and pause now. Okay, hopefully you're back. And let's delve into genre study. So what is genre? Well, genre is just a category of writing. We read from a breadth of different genres as readers, and what we want to start doing is getting our students to write across a breadth of different genres within the classroom. There are just hundreds of different genres and subgenres out there, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit and really talk about five major ones and 17 subgenres that are probably the most prevalent um, out in classrooms and in real life. Okay, so let's tackle the five major ones first. The first one is fiction. That's probably the biggest one because we have all sorts of different subcategories of fiction, but probably the biggest, most widely read ones are realistic fiction, historical fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. Um, Drama is another category or major genre, and that can really be divided into two different subgenres, comedy and tragedy. We have nonfiction, a biggie. It's a big one in classrooms and just in libraries. Within nonfiction, we have informational writing, we have persuasive writing, biography, and autobiography. As opposed to fiction and nonfiction, we're dealing with facts, opinions, and the like. Folklore, it's the next one, and that can be broken into fables, myths, tall tales, legends, and fairy tales. And the last one is poetry. And poetry, I could have 100 little arrows here pointing to all sorts of different types, like cinquains and tankas and free verse poems and rhyming verse poems and acrostic poems. I mean, there's just a ton of them that we aren't going to actually touch upon in our semester, but you can easily go off and do a genre study on your own or with your students. So within these five major main genres, nonfiction is the writing that's true. So we're dealing with facts and we're backing up those facts with research and the like. Fiction is imaginative, made up writing, okay? Folklore are stories that were once passed down orally, but now we have captured it in writing. Dramas are a play or script that get acted out, and poetry is writing that is concerned with the beauty of language. So within the nonfiction subgenres, persuasive writing, what writers do within this genre is try to influence the reader, try to get the reader to believe something or to think a certain way. It's all about convincing readers to agree with the writer. Informational writing is explaining something. It might be explaining how to make something step by step, like a recipe, or it could be just explaining something about the world in which we live. For example, like a book all about sharks. Autobiography is a life story written by the author, and biography is a life story written by somebody else. Fictional subgenres include historical fiction. So this is fiction that's set in the past and is based on real people and or events, but it's still made up and imaginary. Science fiction usually has things like aliens or robots or some sort of futuristic technology, spaceships. Um, all these fictional categories still follow the very similar constructs. You will typically have some sort of problems and all these events that happen and solutions at the end, but they just take a different bend. Realistic fiction has no elements of fantasy. It could be true, so it could be a true story, but it isn't. It's still a made up one. So it's something that really could actually happen to people, but hasn't. It's still made up by the author. And finally, fantasy, which typically has monsters, magic, characters with superpowers, things like that. Folklore usually has an unknown author or will be retold or adapted by an author. Remember, folklore comes from our oral traditions. So folklore goes back even before people recorded these stories. Within this genre, you have subgenres like fables, which are short stories with personified animals and a moral. Personified just means that the animals are given human-like traits, and moral is just a lesson or message of the fable. We have myths, and myths have gods or goddesses that usually account for the creation of something. Tall tales are typically set in the Wild West, on the American frontier. The main character, their skill, size, and strength is greatly exaggerated. Think Paul Bunyan here. And the exaggeration is typically humorous. And then finally, legend. It's usually based on a real person or place. The facts are stretched beyond nonfiction, and it's exaggerated in some sort of serious way. Fairy tales have magic and or talking animals. So oftentimes fairy tales start with once upon a time. It's like fantasy, but it's much older. It goes way back to our oral tradition. Often has a human as a main character, and fables typically have talking animals, um, but fables are very short. So that's how fables are different than fairy tales. Dramas, okay, so remember dramas are these plays and comedy, which usually have is a happy ending, and tragedy, which ends in death and sadness, would be the subgenres of that. So let's do a quick, fun little review and to test your knowledge. So I'm going to give you 10 different examples, and I want you to get out your day book, and I want you to make some educated guesses about which main genre this would fall under and which subgenre this would fall under. Your categories again are nonfiction, fiction, folklore, drama, and poetry. And try to keep in mind all these subgenres while I'm reading the examples, okay? Here's number one, Dogs and Cats by Bob Brady. In this, this is a 5-paragraph essay where the student Bob Brady compares and contrasts dogs and cats. He provides a lot of information about both. So in your day book, write what you think the genre and the subgenre is of this particular example. Okay, number two, your science textbook. So your science textbook contains much of the human knowledge of Earth and the universe. What genre and what subgenre? In My Own Words by Eva Peron. Eva Peron writes the story of her life from childhood to her rise in political power in Argentina. Genre and subgenre. They Came from the Sun by Tom Mitchell. It's a story of a race of aliens that come to enslave the residents of Earth with their advanced weaponry. Only one teacher can stop them, but is it too late? What do you think? Which genre and subgenre would that fall under? The Ant and the Grasshopper, adapted by Chad Peplum. The really short story of an ant who works hard all summer to prepare for winter and a grasshopper who just plays. Winter comes and the grasshopper freezes to death. The moral is prepare today for tomorrow, for tomorrow's needs. Which genre and subgenre? Okay, number 6, The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. It's the fictional story of an African American family living in Flint, Michigan, who go to their grandmother's home in Birmingham, Alabama in the year 1963. The story is told around the 1963 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham, an actual event in history. Okay, which genre and subgenre? Number 7, Sally Ann Thunder Ann Whirlwind, retold by Tom Cranes. Sally Ann Thunder Ann Whirlwind was the toughest girl in the Wild West. Right when she was born, she looked up and said, "Hello, I'm Sally Ann Thunder Ann Whirlwind, and I am amazing." She once made a lasso out of live rattlesnakes, and then she caught a tornado with that lasso. All right, genre and subgenre. Take a guess, an educated guess. All right, number 8, Going Green by Angela Gameri. In this essay, Gameri tries to convince people to do small things to help the environment. She gives readers many suggestions on how to live more eco-friendly and asks readers to make the change. Okay, genre, subgenre. Number 9, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. The first book in the Harry Potter series, Harry goes to wizard school and becomes a Gryffindor. He learns to play Quidditch, a soccer-like game played on flying broomsticks, and he fights an evil within the school with his newfound magic powers. Genre, subgenre. Last one, Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. In his first year of middle school, the main character, Jeff Heffley, deals with cooties, learning to wrestle, Halloween, acting in the school play, and other problems that many middle school students face. Genre and subgenre. All right, time for me to reveal the answers, so check your list. Number 1 was nonfiction informational writing. Number 2, nonfiction informational writing. 3, nonfiction autobiography. 4, fiction, which was science fiction. 5 is folktale, which was a fable. 6 is fiction, historical fiction. 7 was folktale, and it was a tall tale. 8 was nonfiction, it was a persuasive essay. Number 9 was fiction, and it was fantasy. And number 10 was fiction, realistic fiction. How'd you do? Hopefully you did well. Okay. So I'm gonna actually pause the video now, and I'm gonna end this part 1, and then I'm going to broadcast part 2 in a separate YouTube video.